Now, last week we started in the second volume of Mark of the Beast, Volume 2. And I don't know if anybody's aware, but they have kind of an updated version at the South office now. It's not the hardcover. If you remember the style of print that the old one had, this is just to kind of give you an idea, this is the style. It's more like the current books and prophetic word magazines, and it also has the current scriptures in it as well, so we're not having to try to go back and forth and stumble across the way that the things were written in the old King James Version. So, and that is the book that I will be using tonight. So if you're using the old book, some of the page numbers might be off a little bit, but you can still follow along. They're only off by a couple of pages, I think, if that. But we left off in the old book. I think it was supposed to be on the top of page 6. And in this book here, it's right around page 5. But if you go back kind of to the heading over here, the heading just previous, it should be around page 5 or so, where it says, "Woe unto me if I preach not the glad tidings." And we're just going to kind of get caught up here and just kind of recap just a little bit. And Pastor, and he writes in here, this first chapter here is about the commission of the house of Yahweh. And the commission of the house of Yahweh in these last days is to tell the people, is to proclaim the word of Yahweh, and to point out, what mankind's sins are bringing. And it's just like it was in the days of Noah. The commission of the house of Yahweh is to bring a warning. Because before Yahweh allows destruction to come, warnings are always given. So to bring a warning to all of what sin brings. And this is the commission of the house of Yahweh, to both preach and publish that word. Publish that message. And this is done by as it shows here in Revelation 3, 7 through 10, this is actually in the congregation of the house of Yahweh in Philadelphia. Now, and it's not in Philadelphia, but it's the Philadelphia era. And he says here in Revelation 3:7, "To the Moloch of the congregation of the house of Yahweh in Philadelphia write." And of course, this is speaking to the seventh Moloch in these last days, saying to proclaim and write these things. Who opens, who has the key of David, who opens and no man shuts, and shuts and no man opens. He says, "I know your works, and behold, I've set before you an open door that no man can shut." And if you remember the promise that Yahweh has made to this era, the promise that Yahweh has made to this seventh era, which was never made to any era before, is that this work will not be allowed to be put into the grave. And if we take a look at the history, go back through the history of the lost faith of the apostles and prophets, and Yahweh willing, we'll get to some of that this evening too. You see how the era of the house of Yahweh that was run under Yahshua Messiah, under the direct leadership of Yahshua Messiah and the apostles, how it was eventually forced out, how it was eventually wiped out, and it took all the way till just a little bit before 325 AY, when the house of Yahweh was completely wiped off the face of the earth, completely done away with, completely obliterated as an established religion. Okay, and then for almost 1900 years, there was no salvation taught until the reestablishment of the house of Yahweh, and this is where this Moloch of the seventh era, he says, we're told, he says, "I know your works, and I've set before you this open door, for you have a little strength, and have kept my word, and have not denied my name." Well, Pastor shows us here he shows us that what it means to be a part of that Philadelphia era. And right here in the first book of Yisrayl. The first book of Yisrayl here, on chapter 5 and verse 99 there, you can see there what Pastor writes here. He says, Revelation 3:7, where he says, "To the Moloch of the congregation of the house of Yahweh in Philadelphia." And Pastor shows, he says, this means where the true love of Yahweh is taught. That's what this means, where the true love of Yahweh is taught, the 613 laws. And then he goes on to say people in the world have no idea what love is. No, they don't. They confuse love with lust. Just do whatever you want to and then ask for forgiveness for it later. But that's not what true love is. True love, as Pastor shows here, is the keeping of Yahweh's laws, statutes, commandments, and judgments. And that is the works that Yahweh knows. Yahweh knows the works of this era, of this last day's witness. He knows what those works are, and he knows what our works are as well. So Yahshua knows our works because our works were commissioned by him in Matthew 24:14. And I'm on the next page over here, at least in this book here, and he says, an open door. Yahweh has opened the door through the use of. Let me see. I don't have any young men out here. Well, I've got some young men, but I'm talking young men. So much for my visual aid. I was going to ask them if they knew what that was. Praise Yahweh. Oh, there you are. You're over there. Praise Yahweh. It's exactly what that is. That's a cassette tape. But I would venture to guess that there are some people, or some young men, some young people out there that have no idea what that is. That is an invention that Yahweh allowed to be created for the preaching and the publishing of the laws of Yahweh, of the message. And it was created, Pastor has shown, so this word could get out to all of the world. This was how it started. It started with something like this. You had radio, and then, if they didn't catch it live, then people didn't catch it. Or if they weren't in range, how did they catch it? Well, they were able to get something like this, put it in a little device, and they would actually be able to play it and hear it over and over and over again. And this has been done very recently, until fairly recently. I don't even know if you can, somebody was telling me you might be able to buy something that'll play one of these, but these have a certain life expectancy to them, and of course, children can get a hold of them, people can get a hold of them, animals, whatever, and they can pull this little magnetic thing out and just, you have ribbon all over the place and you can't hear it. But this was one of the things. This was one of the things that was used to help spread that message, for the preaching to go out. And of course, with the publishing came about with the invention of the movable type printing press. By Johannes Gutenberg. He was the one that came up with that technology. And that's still the technology that is used today. The movable type printing press is still used. The printing presses are still used. They've changed probably a little bit. There's a great Kohan that runs the press room. He could tell you a lot more about it than I can. But it makes the printing of these books possible, and very, very quickly. And this is how the scriptures were distributed to the people. And without it, everything would have to be hand copied, page by page by page by page. And that's how the scriptures were originally done. But it's through this printing press and through these things, this thing right here, through those, this is how we're able to preach and publish the truth to all who requested it. Now remember, this book was originally written back in 1986 was the 1986 was the copyright on this book. Okay, so back in 1986, this was the technology of the day to help get that out. So, we see that who we are able to preach and publish this truth to all who request it, who preach themselves to those to be those who worship Yahweh, traditionally translated, which says they are Jews. And a Jew is a Jew, and they say that in quotes there, is one who lives by the every word who proceeds out of the mouth of Yahweh. Not one of blood, but of one of heart, out of love. And if you remember, the priesthood, the bloodline priesthood, the Aaronic priesthood, of course, they failed in their job. And you can see that Yahshua is going to be a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. So after the order of one who follows righteousness, and this is the priesthood that is being established now after the order of Melchizedek. So we see here again in Romans 2:29 here it says, but he is a Yahweh who is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, by the Spirit and not by the written code. Such a Yahweh might not be praised by man, but he will be praised by Yahweh. Okay, and a circumcision of the heart. Now, if you remember, Yahweh's laws have two sides to them. They have there's a physical benefit that comes from them, but there's also a spiritual benefit that comes from them as well. Well, the idea of circumcising a young boy at the age of 8 days old, and it has to be done on the 8th day, and Yahweh created it that way. Because that is when the body is physiologically ready and that's best able to deal with that whole process. But the circumcision actually represents the cutting away of something that is considered to be unclean and tossing it away. And this is why we're told here that circumcision of the heart, in other words, we have to get this lust, we have to get this carnality, we have to get the character of the gods out of us. And put within our hearts, put within ourselves, put within our character, Yahweh's righteous laws. And this is, and that is who a true Yahweh is one who is inwardly, one who practices and takes these laws to heart and truly loves and practices those things. A true Yahweh is one whose treasure is the work of Yahweh. There's nothing more important. The work of Yahweh, the preaching and the publishing of the message, the taking on Yahweh's righteous character, which is the preparation for a job in the everlasting government of Yahweh. Now, if you keep Yahweh's word, you will do his work. Yahweh's word is to both us to preach and publish his truth to all the world. In Matthew 24:14 and Yachanan Mark 13:10. And that doesn't mean we have to take it upon ourselves, to go out and tell everybody we see. But it shows here, Pastor clarifies, he says, those who put their tithes into forbidden assemblies, Yahweh shows they will not be protected from this wrath or from this judgment that comes. Yahweh promises protection only for the prophesied house of Yahweh. Remember, where our love is where our treasure is as well. When we pay our tithes and our offerings, and when we turn those in, that allows for the preaching and the publishing. That allows for things, like that cassette tape to go out, like the prophetic word or the booklets or the newsletters. That's what fuels that. That's what sends that out. The same thing the same thing goes with the streaming on the internet, which is now truly, it truly reaches everywhere. It's those tithes and offerings go into helping to supply those things so that message can go out. In Revelation 3:10, it says, "I will also keep you from the hour of temptation." From the hour of temptation. Let me see here. I gotta fix this here. It keeps cutting off on me. From the hour of temptation. Okay, where am I at here? There it is. That'll fix that. All right. This hour of temptation here. I looked up the word hour. Where's that here? Okay. You can see that hour. That hour, when we're talking about that hour of temptation, it means, it's a primary word meaning an hour. It means literally or figuratively. Think about the prophecies. Think about what we're learning in the news. Think about what Pastor has been bringing us recently. This hour of temptation, it's a day, hour, instant, season. It's a time. Okay? That's what this hour, the hour means. It can literally mean an hour. The word temptation here. It's word number 3986 in the Greek, and it means putting to proof, by experience of evil, solicitation, by implication adversity, temptation, to try. Remember the law, remember the plan of Yahweh. Remember what the plan of Yahweh is. The plan of Yahweh is to allow mankind 6,000 years to go their own way. For what reason? To test and prove, to prove to mankind what the rejection of the laws of Yahweh brings. Okay? So this temptation, this temptation, the experience of evil, who will keep you from that hour of the experience, this experiencing of this evil, this the solicitation, this putting to proof. Okay? But that comes from word number 3985. 3985 means to test, and it also means to endeavor, to scrutinize, to entice. There's a lot of enticing that's going on. The desire to sin is with you, but you must overcome it. The pulls and the temptations are there to try to pull us away from the work of Yahweh, away from standing in our place, into the mess and the destruction that's going on out in the world today. To endeavor, to scrutinize, entice, to examine, to prove, or to tempt. And that comes from word 3984. 3984 comes from, and it means through the idea of piercing. It means a test. It means an attempt, an experience. Notice it also means a trial. Remember, we're under trial. We're the house of Yahweh. The house of Yahweh is being tried at this time. We're being judged whether or not we're going to be righteous or whether or not we're going to be evil. Are we going to follow Yahweh's or not, like Yahweh's law or not? The same thing that occurred with the children of Israel when dealing with Moshe. And then it comes from a base of 4008, which means an accusative case, an obsolete, means to pierce. To pierce across, beyond, further, side over. Okay? Anybody have any idea where this is going? Okay. Let's take a look in The Birth of the Nuclear Baby on page 125. Okay. The Birth of the Nuclear Baby on page 125. Okay, and over here in Revelation 9:13 through 18, it talks about the sixth Moloch. It talks about the sixth Moloch, and it talks about the four messengers. The quartet were loosed, which were prepared for an hour, a day, a moon, and a year in order to slay a third part of men. Well, how is that done? Remember, that's done through nuclear war, and it's described. And in my vision, I saw the horses of those who sat upon them like this. They had the breastplate of fire, of red, of jacinth, of blue, of brimstone, or yellow. And the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions. And by these three were the third part of men killed, by the fire, by the smoke, and by the brimstone. I remember Pastor brought out, and because he dealt a lot with the printing and the laying of the colors one on top of the other. Well, see, here you see the fire. Let me move that down a little bit. Kind of get the idea here. There you've got the fire. And then you've got the jacinth and the brimstone. When worked all together, when they all come together, we see the picture of that nuclear explosion. Okay? Now, if you remember, Revelation wasn't the only place that talked about the nuclear explosion. The nuclear explosion, remember, was prophesied by who? Praise Yahweh, by Moshe. Moshe prophesied of that as well. And he talks here in, and I'll just get to over here at, Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy 28:22, he says, "And it will come to pass that you will cause yourselves to be struck with consumption, with a fever, with an inflammation, with scorching heat." Remember that scorching heat was used to describe, with the sword, with blasting. And remember, gunpowder had not been invented at this time. But yet the Hebrew word, as Pastor showed us, meant blasting, and with mildew. And they will stay with you until you perish. Well, of course, this consumption and its fever and the scorching heat and the blasting is having a reference to nuclear explosions. Well, Deuteronomy 28, 23 to 24. Yahweh willing, you can see that. It says, "And the heavens that is over your head shall be as brass, and the earth under you shall be as iron. And it will come to pass that it will cause the rain of your land to become powder and dust from heaven, and it shall come down upon you until you are destroyed." Okay, within the meanings of the words, brass, iron, powder, and dust. What I really want to take a look at here, remember what we read in Revelation, what the hour of temptation, that temptation, one of the meanings of that word temptation was to pierce. Look here what this word iron means. You can see here it says from the root iron as cutting, by extension an iron implement, and it comes from 1269, which means the idea to pierce holes. So what Yahweh is doing, what he was telling us there, what Yahweh was telling us and promising us there in Revelation 3:10 is that I will keep you from the hour of temptation. That hour of temptation ties directly into that nuclear burning that will take place in 1 hour. You see what he was telling us there? Keep you from the hour of temptation. So that's a promise. That's a promise to Yahweh's house, that we will be kept from that hour of temptation. Praise Yahweh. Pastor was teaching us about that hour of temptation all the way back in 1986. I about come unglued when I saw that. That was just like, whoa. But anyway, many will see, Pastor shows here, he says, many will see the folly of their ways when they see they have not escaped the wrath of Satan when she is cast to this earth. They will then start begging to come to this place of safety. This will be a fulfillment of Yachanan's prophecy in Revelation 3:9, which says, I will appoint them for the purpose of worshiping in your presence, in the presence of your footstool. Now, Pastor shows here, he says, there is a place of safety for them to come to, but not before they have suffered here, it shows, from Satan's anger. This all comes to pass just before the great day of Yahweh. In Yael, chapter 2, verse 31 to 32, it says, before the sun will be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of Yahweh comes. And whoever will call with the name of Yahweh will be delivered. Remember that calling with the name of Yahweh is not simply using the name of Yahweh. It actually means, to take on that name, to take on those characteristics of what the name of Yahweh is, of what it stands for. For whoever will call with the name of Yahweh will be delivered. For in Mount Zion, there will be deliverance. There is deliverance. There's deliverance here in Yahweh's house, in the place of safety, here at Abel, among the remnant who has escaped of those whom Yahweh calls. Now notice here he says, not every individual of the house of Yahweh will escape, because not all will humble themselves to Yahweh completely, living by every word that proceeds out of his mouth. So, Satan's vengeance will continue. The consequences of nuclear war, these things are going to continue. And they're going to continue until mankind gets the point. Until they learn their lesson, that of what their way brings. And once that lesson has been drilled completely into their head, and it's going to have to get to the point where no flesh would be saved, where they have destroyed themselves so completely and so thoroughly that there's absolutely no way life is going to continue. And it's going to have to get to that point before Yahweh steps in. And then Yahweh will step in at that point and say, as enough. That's enough. You've learned the lesson. And at that point, Yahweh will go ahead and Yahweh steps in. And then he will send Yeshua back to the earth. And Yeshua chains Satan and her workers, and her demons for a period of 1,000 years. And it's during that 1,000-year time period, that millennial reign of Yeshua, that in that time that she's chained, she cannot hurt or deceive the people any longer. She's just going to be set aside, and she's going to be powerless. She's not going to be able to do a thing. And then that's where our job, those who blessed and holy are those who have part in this first resurrection. They're those that will reign with Yeshua for 1,000 years. Our job is going to be restoring the earth to its former glory, to the way that it was when it was created. And that goes back to, you can go back to the tail end of Mark of the Beast Volume 1 and kind of rehearse that, chapter 12 of Volume 1. And Pastor shows here, he says, at the start of the 1,000 years, Satan will be bound, and at that time Yahshua will call up to him all of those who have submitted to Yahweh to be with him. And those will be called up for the great marriage supper and to the safety that will be afforded to them from the last 7 plagues. At the marriage supper between Yahshua and all the saints, we have now come to a point in future history when those who have suffered because of Yahweh's laws will then be rejoicing with Yahweh and Yahshua. So, and it's to a point in a future history. But that future history, that future point is not that far away. As each day passes, men, it grows closer and closer and closer. Every day that we don't utilize for the building of our minds, for the building, for filling our lamps with this golden oil that comes from Yahweh's house, each day that passes that we don't take advantage of that is one day that's that much oil we won't have. So we need to take advantage of it and do everything that we can to make sure that we're fully prepared for this time, because we're qualifying for a job. We're qualifying for the highest job that is going to be offered to anybody. There's no job this world has that will hold a candle to anything that Yahweh has to offer. Absolutely nothing. But the temptation, the temptation and the deception is there. But we have to remain focused here. And look in Revelation 15, 2-4, and it says, "And I saw as it were a sea of glass mingled with fire, and those who had prevailed over the beast and over the likeness and over his mark and over the number of the name, standing on the sea of glass, having the laws of Yahweh. And they sang the song of Moshe, the servant of Yahweh, and the song of the Lamb, saying, Great and marvelous are your works, Father Yahweh Almighty. Just and true are your ways, O King of saints. Who will not reverence you, O Yahweh, and glorify your name? For only you are holy. For all nations will come and worship before you, for your judgments are made manifest." The judgments of Yahweh is going, they are manifest. The judgments of Yahweh are set. They're not going to change. All the sufferings and all the torment and all the persecutions the people of Yahweh have gone through will quickly be forgotten. It's going to be like, it's going to be a distant, it's going to be way in the past. Think about some of the tests and the trials that we've come through so far. Just think about that. Just think about a couple of those. Some of them that we thought, man, I'm never going to get through this. But guess what? We're still here. You got through it, right? How does that little test that you had in the past, how does it seem now? Not that big of a deal, right? Anybody that's come out of this world has been tested with having to tell an employer, I'm not working on Yahweh's Sabbath. How big of a test was it at that point? I know for me it was pretty big. It was pretty big. I had family that was against me, telling me I was crazy. I was nuts for doing what I was doing, that I was going to throw away everything I worked for that. That was a lot of pressure at that time. Not so big of a deal now. Yeah, no big deal. But it's the things that we go through that, we successfully get through it, and we know Yahweh's going to bring us through it, because Yahweh will not put upon us anything more than we can bear. He's not going to set us up for Yahweh does not set us up for failure. He sets us up for success. And we have to remember that. Yahweh Satan and her workers can do nothing more than what Yahweh allows. And that is what we have to remember. Yahweh is in complete control. Always remember that. He always has been, and he always will be. But joy will abound in their lives. Joy has never been experienced by man before, so great and marvelous will be this time. For I consider the sufferings, in Romans 8:18 says, For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that will be revealed within us. This glory. We get some pretty strange ideas about, some ideas what we think about glory. We think about, glory, we think about honor, we think about things like that. But there's more to it than that. There's a lot more to it than that. This word glory is word number 1391 in Strong's, and it means, as very apparent in a wide application, dignity, honor, praise, Okay, but it comes from 1380. And 1380 means let me see here, a prolonged form of a primary verb. Compare the base of 1166 of the same meaning, to think by implication, to seem, truthfully or uncertainly, to be accounted of own pleasure, to be of reputation. To be of reputation, to suppose. Now, a reputation is the overall quality or, notice, character as seen or judged by people. So this glory that is being revealed in us is Yahweh's righteous character, because we submit to those laws of Yahweh, which builds that reputation, builds that character within us. So this is, the sufferings, what we have to go through, it's nothing compared to that. And look in Isaiah 42. Isaiah 42:8. I am Yahweh. That is my name. Remember, Yahweh's name describes his righteous characteristics, right? Yahweh's name contains his 13 righteous attributes. I am Yahweh. That is my name. And my glory I will not give to another, nor my praises to graven images. Remember Exodus 34, 5 through 7, where Yahweh passed in front of Moshe, and remember what he showed. He proclaimed his name. And then he proclaimed Yahweh's righteous 13 attributes to him, which again is Yahweh's righteous character. So this is what is being instilled within us. When we submit to these laws, when we submit to these things, we're allowing that to be built within us. And it is that character, it's that way in which we conduct ourselves that is going to help qualify us for these positions in the government of Yahweh. So you can kind of see how all of that works together. But this time will be a time of rejoicing and a time of sharing personal experiences with all the saints whom Yahweh has called down throughout the centuries. Pastor has said that. He said that, Abraham's going to be looking for you. Daniel's going to be looking for you because Daniel knew of these times. The prophets, Yeketziah, the prophets they're all going to be searching. How did you get through that time? What was that time like? How did you get through it? And we're going to be there as a witness. Because Yahweh has to prove, that he can pull out somebody out of the worst time of trouble, out of the worst period of deception that is there. And it's bad now. And it's more than likely it's going to get worse. But we have to be tested beyond the ways that the people were tested before. Because we have to make it. If we wouldn't make it, then Yahweh knows that nobody else would either. Okay, remember, Pastor has taught us that for years. But the time period at the end of the Great Tribulation, after Satan has caused nuclear war among the nations on the earth, Satan has stirred the nations into a frenzy to try to wipe out all life on the face of the earth. Look at what's being done today. I think what we see in the news today could be classified as a frenzy. I mean, the news media is out there. You've got people that are stirring up the nations, they're just doing everything they can to stir up bitterness, hatred, strife, in any way that they can, where they feel that the only thing that they have is violence. Is the way of Cain, is this Nimrod system. They think that this is the only way, the only thing that they have to turn to. But there's never been a solution. That is not a solution. There is only one solution, and that is through the submission to the laws of Yahweh. And this is what we are proving here today. This is what we're proving with our living sacrifices, because we do. We present ourselves as living sacrifices to Yahweh. Sacrificing the old man and his practices, the old lustful way, which is pictured in baptism. And we rise up, we come out of that watery grave, leaving that old filthy man with those lustful desires, those lustful things in the grave. Just leave that behind and go forward, knowing what we are attempting to do, knowing what we're doing when we do submit to the laws of Yahweh, and not bringing harm to anybody, and improving our character, improving to Yahweh, that we can be trusted for the positions that he wants to give you. But Satan is stirring the nations into this frenzy, and the sky will be turned totally black from war that Satan caused among the nations. And human history has then come to the place where where no life can survive. That's the only way mankind's going to get it into their head that, oh, this is what this way brings. This is at the end of the Great Tribulation and would be the end of all life, except for our great Heavenly Father Yahweh, who will step in and who will stop these men who are hurting the earth. Then comes Yahweh's judgment. The judgment. The judgments are set. Yahweh's judgments are set. In Deuteronomy 28, in the law it shows, if you will diligently obey my voice, then all these blessings will come upon you. But if you don't follow my laws, and these curses or these consequences will come upon you and pursue you until you're destroyed. And it's because, it's not because Yahweh is sending these things down upon us, but it's because we're doing things we shouldn't be doing. And when we do those things, Yahweh knows what the microorganisms are going to create within the human body when we eat unclean food. When we violate the proper relationship laws and guidelines that are written there in Leviticus 18. He knows what these things are going to bring, and he warns us. And if we choose to go that way, then we're going to bring those things upon ourselves. And he says, well, the judgment is set. I told you that's what was going to take place, but you didn't listen. So that's what they mean. And that's what it means, Yahweh's judgment. In Revelation 16:2 it says, and the first went and poured out his bowl upon the earth, and there came a noisome and grievous sore upon the men who had the mark of the beast, and upon those who worshipped his likeness. And then the pastor shows here, he says, notice that only those who have the mark of the beast or worship its God will suffer in this part of mankind's history. Those whose treasure has been our Heavenly Father Yahweh and his work are protected through this judgment. We're protected through our obedience. It's our obedience that protects us. Revelation 9:20-21, and the rest of the men who were not killed by these plagues, they still did not repent of the works of their hands, that they should not worship demons and gods of gold and silver and brass and stone and wood, which can neither hear nor see nor walk. Neither did they repent of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornications, nor of their thefts. Okay, so we see even after this 1/3 of man is killed over 1/4 part of the earth in and around the great river Euphrates, mankind, they're still not going to repent. They're going to continue on until ultimately 4/5 of the earth's population is wiped out. But the 7 seals of Revelation pictures, now notice this here, it says, the 7 seals of Revelation pictures the time from when Yeshua was taken up into the clouds until he will come again to the earth. The sequence of events Yahweh has inspired to be written will come to pass just as Yahweh has said. Remember, not one of these things will return without carrying out what they will do. Every word that Yahweh says will come to pass. It has so far, and it will continue to do so. We can bet our life on it. But in chapter 2, the first seal of the 7 seals, Revelation 5:1, it says, and I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. In Revelation, Yachanan was shown the prophecies of Yahweh, the scroll written in 7 seals. The very first seal is the picture of the continuous pattern of man's governments begun by Nimrod. Nimrod was the first to form a government by the people and of the people and against Yahweh. And we've covered this in many publications. Did Yahshua Messiah pre-exist? Devil worship, the shocking facts. It was in there. It's in many of Pastor's writings, and he describes this. But Nimrod was it's a system. It's a system, a form of government by the people and of the people and against Yahweh. In Genesis 10:8-9, it says, Cush begot Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one on the earth. He was a tyrant who deceived, who turned against Yahweh. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod the tyrant who deceived, who turned against Yahweh. Now, remember it says Cush begot Nimrod. Now, if you go up a few verses, it lists, the scriptures show who the sons of Cush were. Well, Nimrod was not listed among the sons of Cush. Why? Well, because Nimrod wasn't a son of Cush. Nimrod was this combination, this geopolitical, combination of church and state. this tyrannic religion who deceived and who turned against Yahweh. Therefore, like Nimrod, the tyrant who deceived, who turned against Yahweh. And Pastor shows here, he shows, this history of Nimrod the hunter was a hunter of men's souls. He says, building the empire was through force, conquering and to conquer. Nimrod's empire had a form of religion that was opposed to Yahweh's way. Now, the power of peace through strength, the power of peace in war. That's actually an emblem that you see on the back of a $1 bill with the seal of the United States. It's got the picture of the eagle, and I don't have a picture of that with me today. But it's got a picture of an eagle, and it's got olive branches in one hand and arrows in the other, and that's what that symbolizes. It symbolizes the power of peace through strength or peace through war. If somebody is powerful enough, nobody would dare make war against me. Nobody would dare come against me because I'll kick their tail. I will wipe them off the face of the earth if they attempt to do that. Well, that is the mentality, but this is the history. This is the way of this system today. In Revelation 6, 1 through 2, it shows here, and I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were, one of the four living creatures saying with a voice like thunder, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow. And a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. Now, this form of government, Pastor shows here, this form of government, going forth, conquering and to conquer, has never ceased since it started, neither has its religion changed. And Pastor, he shows here, he says, many have mistaken this first seal to represent Yahshua and the early believers who carried the glad tidings to the world. They assume this because this false Messiah is pictured as coming on a white horse, and Yahshua is also pictured as coming on a white horse. Okay, in Revelation 19:11, take a look at that one. And they're close enough together we can really compare them here. And he says, and I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat upon it was faithful and true, and in righteousness he judges. He judges in righteousness. He doesn't go forth conquering and to conquer with a bow in his hand. He goes forth. He goes forth, on this white horse and was faithful and true, and he goes forth in righteousness. But they both on a white horse. Okay, and this shows the deception that's in the world because, wherever there's been a work of Yahweh, there's always been a work of Satan. You've got a counterfeit religion. You've got counterfeit religions that are running neck and neck in an effort to deceive the people, in an effort to keep the people from converting to the laws of Yahweh. You got to remember, Satan is trying to destroy mankind. She does not want to see the kingdom of Yahweh go forth. She's going to see it go forth, but she doesn't want to see it. She's doing everything in her power, and that's part of this destruction that is coming. Because if she thinks if she can wipe mankind completely off the face of the earth and destroy mankind completely, then Yahweh's plan has failed. Well, Yahweh is pulling out for him certain individuals that he knew from the beginning. From the beginning. Preordained to be called out in a certain time period. Throughout history, people have been called out and called into the work of Yahweh because Yahweh knew when they were going to be born. He knew when they would come in, and he saw certain characteristics in each and every one of them that he wanted to be a part of his kingdom. And men, this is why you're sitting here right now, because Yahweh knew you before you were born. And he sees something in each and every one of you, a characteristic, a quality that he wants in his government, in his ruling kingdom, in his government, and he wants it there. That's why you're here. You're here to qualify. So, when you think of it that way, Yahweh has made his choice of who he wants in his kingdom. You wouldn't be here otherwise. Okay? But the ball is in our court. It's up to us. What do we want? Do we want to be a part of this or not? And, Yahweh promises us. Yahweh says, he promises us. He says, I promise you, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Think about that promise. The creator of the universe calls us here, and he says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. a promise from the Creator, and Yahweh keeps every one of his promises. But when, it's us that make a choice, that choose not to be a part of us. It's us that turn from Yahweh. Yahweh will never turn from us. It's us who turn from him. Remember Isaiah 59, 1 and 2. Behold, Yahweh's hand is not shortened that it cannot save, nor is there heavy that he cannot hear. But your own iniquities, it's your things, it's what you do, it's what we do that separate us from Yahweh. Not him, it's us. It's our decisions. But it's an awesome blessing. It's an awesome thing to know that Yahweh wants us. He sees us, and he's called us here. And he's really made his desire known of who he wants in his kingdom. It's up to us. Do we want to accept that invitation or not? But then Pastor shows her, he says, notice the difference. This false religion is pictured as carrying a bow, and it goes forth conquering and to conquer. We have already seen through history how the religious leaders conquered the believers of Yahweh by force, with weapons of slaughter, while all the time pretending to be priests, righteous fathers, righteous heads of churches. By this conquering by the bow was part of Nimrod's progress. By it he prevailed and built a worldwide religion. But as we have said before, this first seal in Revelation is only a continuation of the pattern that was established in the beginning. It's the same system that Cain had. It's the same system that instituted and created by Nimrod, or created by Cush when Cush begot Nimrod. The first seal is not speaking of Nimrod himself. Look at what Yachanan saw was to shortly come to pass. In Revelation 1:1, this was, remember, the revelation. This is what was revealed to Yachanan, to show his servants things which must shortly come to pass. So even at the time of Yachanan, these things had not come to pass, but this was what was shortly come to pass. These were future events, even to Yachanan. This first seal in Revelation 6:2 started with the persecution recorded in Acts chapter 8. Okay, and this is covered in this book right here. It's covered in this book here. Lost Faith of the Apostles and Prophets. Okay? And it covers that extensively in there. Okay? But setting a pattern of religious leaders who pass themselves off as ones of righteousness while persecuting the true followers of Yahweh. The white horses pictured in Revelation 6:2 to show this false religion will pretend to be righteous and even resemble righteousness, when in fact it is totally against all the laws of Yahweh. Okay, and remember, the Roman church would always go after somebody they called a heretic. Well, what's a heretic? By definition, a heretic is one who opposes the teachings of the Catholic Church. Okay, that's what a heretic is. Especially by their definition. Now, notice the difference between the true Messiah, Yahshua, and the false leaders of this world's religions. Notice what Yahshua carries with him. In Revelation 19:15, and out of his mouth goes a sharp two-edged sword, that with it he should strike the nations, and he will rule over them with a rod of iron. Now, it's not ruling with being oppressive, but it's through righteousness, through the teaching of the laws of Yahweh. And he treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty. But it's not. Remember, it's not wrath. This is what the world wants you to think. They want you to picture that Yahweh is a mean, evil God that is just waiting for somebody to make a mistake so he can squash them down. That's not our loving Heavenly Father. The world religions have made him, they have attempted to twist the minds to believe that that's how he is. But with the correction of the Scriptures, and with what we see in the Scriptures, with the qualities and what the characteristics of his name are, you get a totally different picture. We see the true nature and the true character of Yahweh. By comparing Scriptures, we can see what this sword is that proceeds out of the mouth of Yahshua. In Revelation 1:5, and from Yahshua Messiah, the faithful witness, and the firstborn from the dead, the ruler of future kings of the earth, to him who loved us and freed us from our sins by his own blood. Look in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 12. For the word of Yahweh, the law and the prophets, is living and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword. And remember, Pastor said that this book of Yahweh, it's a living book. It's alive, and it's breathing. It is the book of life. It shows you how to attain life. The things that are written in that book, we see coming to pass right before our eyes. Even though we may not recognize what it is, the prophecies are written there, and they're being fulfilled right before our eyes. And it is living. It is a living book. Sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the division of the body and spirit, and to the joints of the marrow, and as a discerner of the thoughts and the intents of the heart. Now, here's another word that we see here, this word piercing. And it has the meaning here of to reach through, that is to penetrate. And it comes from another word that was word number 1338 in Strong's. That comes from the base of 2425, which means to arrive competent. Okay, think about what we're doing when we submit ourselves to the laws of Yahweh. What this word of Yahweh, this the sharp two-edged sword, what it does, it causes us to arrive competent, in ample in amount, or fit in character. Able, sufficient, worthy. So this is what this powerful two-edged sword does. The laws of Yahweh, this character of Yahweh. It's a discerner of the thoughts and the intents of the heart. When we convert to that character, we begin to take on and we begin to think and act just like Yahweh Himself. We take on those things, and we don't. We don't ever think. We would never think about bringing harm to anyone, to ourselves through our actions, or anyone else, the environment, nothing. But Yahshua carries with him the word of Yahweh, the word of Yahweh. He is not against Yahweh as the false Messiah is. Jesus Christ did away with the laws of Yahweh. He said, you don't have to keep those old laws. Well, he's an anti-Messiah because he is against the laws of Yahweh. He is teaching against those laws. The difference in Yahshua and the false teachers is that Yahshua brings the true word of Yahweh with him. The false teachers bring only false doctrine, but they are made to appear to be the truth. They twist the unlearned and unstable. They twist the scriptures to their own destruction. Look at Satan. Satan is more subtle and crafty than any beast of the field that Yahweh created. You look at the twisting of the words that she did when she was working, when she was talking and deceiving Eve. She twisted those words around just a little bit, but she twisted them around just enough to cause someone who would actually listen to her foolishness to doubt Yahweh. But the false teachers bring only false doctrine, but they are made to appear to be truthful. This false religion is and has always been a part of this world's governments. In fact, the churches of the world have worked through politics to accomplish the deaths of so many saints. Of so many saints here. In this book here, The Lost Faith of the Apostles and Prophets, on pages 27 to 32, I'll show you here real quick. And see here, this is on page 27. It talks about the 10 persecutions. And these 10 persecutions began with the era that was under the under the control or under direct leadership of the apostles and the prophets, or of the apostles. And then let me see if I can. There's too much in here to cover, but it shows here that it shows the first persecution, and it was recognized. It talks about the house of Yahweh, how it was recognized as a separate religion under the Roman emperor from 54 to 68 AY. The second persecution under the emperor Domitian from 81 to 96 AY. The third persecution was from 98 to 117. And it goes all the way, all the way up to the 10th persecution, which was the most severe, by the way. The 10th persecution under the emperor Diocletian was the worst, and it took place from 284 to 305 AY. And if you notice the date, 305 AY, it was just a few short years before the Council of Nicaea under Emperor Constantine took place in 325 AY, and all of these things all tie together. But you can see the things that they did, the laws and stuff, the laws that they brought, and under the persecution, and I think I actually get into it a little later in the book. We get into it a little bit later, but like under the 10th persecution, it was the most violent. It was this violent persecution starting in 303 was the refusal of those who called themselves believers, who were the house of Yahweh, to show their loyalty to the emperor by worshiping him as a god at their formal celebrations. And the 10th persecution was the most severe, and Diocletian, by successive decrees, one after another, was written to break the heretical believers who would dare oppose the official worship ordered. So there were laws of the land were passed, that all places of assembly or worship were to be destroyed, all Bibles were burned, all believers were to be deprived of civil rights in the empire, all believers in the palace were to be sold as slaves, all elders and deacons were to be arrested and compelled to sacrifice to the Roman gods, and all believers, whether clergy or not, were compelled to sacrifice to the Roman gods. And if they didn't, they were put to death in the most horrendous ways possible, in the most horrendous ways thinkable. Under the, under the emperor, under this under the system of this first of this first seal, the going forth, conquering and to conquer, they would squash any religion or anybody that opposed them. This was the reason this was the same reason for the Crusades, and this was the same thing that was done in Nazi Germany. The same type of thing that was done there. Laws were passed against a certain group of people, the Sabbath keepers. They were singled out. They were forced to move to certain places. Their property was taken. Their rights were taken away. They were forced to live in ghettos. They were forced to live in all kinds of just evil conditions. But this is the fulfillment and the continuation on of what we see here with this white horse, with this white horse and going forth, conquering and to conquer. So this system, even though it continues now, again, this false religion is and has always been a part of this world's governments. In fact, the churches of this world have worked through politics to accomplish the deaths of so many saints. Today the churches are becoming even more involved in politics and are ever becoming stronger politically and in the affairs of this world. Yahshua, he was never a part of this. He said, my kingdom was not of this world. We're told men to come out from among them and be separate, says Yahweh. We have to live in this world. We have to, we can't take off. We can't levitate off the face of the earth at this time. But we can come out. We can come out from the way of this world by not taking on the characteristics of this world. Leave the character of the gods behind. Leave that aside. Leave that in the grave like we vowed upon baptism, and take on Yahweh's perfect righteous character as taught by Yahweh's seventh Malach, the great Kohan Yisrayl Hawkins, in the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. So anyway, with that, men, we'll be on the new book here. We're on page 12, and we'll be starting with here where it says where Yahshua was never a part of this world in Yachanan 18:36, and that will be at some point after the feast. Listen to the announcements and be prepared, because we're going to continue on through this book. Exciting book. So with that, men, may Yahweh be with you and bless you.